First contact. In the vast expanse of the Orion Arm, the Craxian Empire reigned supreme. For millennia, they had conquered and subjugated hundreds of worlds, their advanced technology and ruthless tactics making them the undisputed masters of the galaxy. Their emperor, Zorgax the Unyielding, sat upon a throne of starship-grade alloys, his eyes gleaming with the cold light of 1,000 conquered suns. It was during the 7th cycle of Zorgax's reign that a Craxian exploration vessel, the Intrepid, stumbled upon an uncharted planet in a remote corner of the galaxy. The blue-green world, designated as Earth by its inhabitants, was home to a relatively primitive species known as humans. Captain Cryos of the Intrepid studied the planet with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "These humans," Cryos sneered, "they have barely mastered spaceflight. Their technology is laughable, their military capabilities insignificant." And yet, the captain paused, his eyes narrowing as he examined the sensor readings. "They show remarkable potential. Their population is vast, their resources abundant. And their location, it's perfect for a new Craxian outpost." Cryos leaned back in his command chair, a cruel smile playing across his lips. "Prepare a report for the Emperor," he ordered his communications officer. "Tell him we have found a new world to conquer, a new species to bend to our will." As the Intrepid slipped silently back into the void, Earth remained oblivious to the impending threat. Humanity continued its petty squabbles and daily struggles, unaware that the eyes of a galactic empire had fallen upon them. In the halls of power on Craxus Prime, Emperor Zorgax listened to Captain Cryos' report with growing interest. "These humans," Zorgax mused, "they sound like the perfect prey. Weak, divided, technologically inferior. They will make a fine addition to our empire." The Emperor rose from his throne, his massive form casting a shadow across the room. "Prepare the invasion fleet," he commanded. "We will take this Earth, and its people will learn to kneel before the might of the Craxian Empire." As the Craxian war machine mobilized, its citizens celebrated the news of a new conquest. Propaganda spread throughout the empire, depicting humans as primitive savages in need of Craxian enlightenment. The invasion fleet, a vast armada of warships and troop transports, assembled in the skies above Craxus Prime. On Earth, life went on as usual. But in the depths of space, a storm was gathering. A storm that would soon engulf the unsuspecting planet and forever change the course of human history. For the Craxian Empire, Earth was just another world to conquer, another species to subjugate. They had no idea what they were about to unleash. The invasion begins. The Craxian invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace on the outskirts of Earth's solar system, a vast armada of sleek, angular warships bristling with advanced weaponry. At the heart of the fleet was the Emperor's flagship, the Harbinger, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed the other vessels like a shark among minnows. On the bridge of the Harbinger, Emperor Zorgax sat upon his command throne, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of Earth floating before him. "Open a channel to the humans," he ordered, his voice dripping with contempt. The face of the Human United Nations Secretary General appeared on the view screen, her expression a mix of confusion and fear. "People of Earth," Zorgax began, his voice booming across the airwaves. "I am Emperor Zorgax of the Craxian Empire. Your world now belongs to us. You have one planetary rotation to surrender unconditionally. Resist, and you will be crushed." The Secretary General's face hardened, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We will never surrender," she declared, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Humanity will fight for its freedom, no matter the cost." Zorgax's laughter echoed through the bridge, a harsh, grating sound that sent shivers down the spines of his subordinates. "So be it," he growled. "You have sealed your fate." With a flick of his wrist, the Emperor signaled the beginning of the invasion. The Craxian fleet surged forward, their weapon systems locking onto key targets across the planet. In a matter of moments, the skies above Earth's major cities were filled with the ominous shapes of alien warships. The first wave of orbital bombardment struck without warning, devastating military installations, power plants, and communication hubs across the globe. Millions perished in the initial onslaught, their screams of terror drowned out by the deafening roar of Craxian plasma cannons. As the dust settled, the true horror of the invasion became clear. Craxian troop transports descended from the sky like a swarm of locusts, disgorging thousands of heavily armed soldiers onto the surface. The Craxian ground forces, clad in advanced power armor and wielding energy weapons, marched through the ruined streets of Earth's cities, their eyes glinting with malice. The human militaries, caught off guard by the sudden attack, scrambled to mount a defense. Tanks and fighter jets roared into battle, their weapons hopelessly outmatched by the superior Craxian technology. In the chaos of the invasion, Earth's nations put aside their differences and united against the common enemy. But even as humanity struggled to fight back, the Craxians pushed forward with ruthless efficiency. The skies burned with the wreckage of human aircraft, while the streets ran red with the blood of fallen soldiers and civilians alike. The Craxians seemed unstoppable, their conquest of Earth all but assured. In the depths of their underground bunkers, Earth's leaders watched the destruction unfold with growing despair. They had always known that humanity was not alone in the universe, but they had never imagined a threat like the Craxian Empire. As the reports of casualties and lost territory poured in, they began to wonder if surrender might be the only option. But even in the darkest hour, there were those who refused to give up hope. In secret laboratories and hidden bases across the planet, human scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to find a way to fight back. They studied the wreckage of downed Craxian ships and captured enemy equipment, searching for any weakness they could exploit. As the Craxian invasion continued, the stage was set for a desperate struggle between two civilizations, one ancient and powerful, the other young and defiant. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and the only thing that stood between Earth and total subjugation was the indomitable human spirit, humanity's surprising resistance. In the weeks following the initial Craxian invasion, the situation on Earth seemed dire. The alien forces had quickly established footholds on every continent, their advanced technology and brutal tactics overwhelming the human resistance at every turn. But even as the Craxians tightened their grip on the planet, they began to realize that conquering humanity would not be as easy as they had anticipated. Across the globe, human militaries and civilian resistance groups launched a series of daring guerrilla attacks against Craxian supply lines and troop formations. Using hit-and-run tactics and improvised weapons, they managed to inflict heavy casualties on the invaders, frustrating their attempts to consolidate control over key territories. In the ruins of a once thriving metropolis, a group of human survivors huddled in the shadows of a bombed-out skyscraper. Among them was Sergeant Mia Lee, a veteran of the initial Craxian assault. She peered through the scope of her salvaged Craxian sniper rifle, watching for any sign of enemy movement. "They may have better tech," she muttered to her fellow survivors, "but we know this city like the back of our hand. We'll make them bleed for every inch they try to take." As if on cue, a patrol of Craxian soldiers appeared on the street below, their armor glinting in the harsh sunlight. Mia squeezed the trigger, and the lead Craxian's head snapped back as the plasma bolt found its mark. The rest of the patrol scattered, seeking cover from the unseen sniper. Across the planet, scenes like this played out daily. Human resistance fighters ambushed Craxian convoys, sabotaged their equipment, and disrupted their communications. The invaders soon learned to fear the shadows, knowing that a human with a grudge and a stolen plasma rifle could be lurking around any corner. But the human resistance was not limited to guerrilla warfare alone. In secret laboratories deep underground, teams of scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to unlock the secrets of Craxian technology. They pored over captured equipment and studied the wreckage of downed enemy ships, searching for any exploitable weakness. Dr. Elena Sokolov, a brilliant physicist and expert in advanced propulsion systems, led one of these teams. She had watched in horror as the Craxians had decimated her homeland, and now she was determined to find a way to strike back. Their technology is advanced, but not invulnerable, she told her colleagues as they examined a captured Craxian power core. Every system has its flaws. We just need to find them and exploit them. As the weeks turned into months, the human resistance began to score major victories against the Craxians. Using a combination of reverse-engineered alien tech and good old-fashioned human ingenuity, they managed to develop weapons and defenses that could match the invaders' own. In a daring raid on a Craxian supply depot, human forces managed to capture several intact dropships and a cache of advanced weaponry. With these new assets at their disposal, they launched a series of counter-offensives, retaking key territories and forcing the Craxians to divert more and more resources to the front lines. The Craxians were not used to facing such determined resistance. In their previous conquests, most species had capitulated quickly in the face of their overwhelming might. But the humans refused to yield, fighting back with a ferocity and resourcefulness that caught the invaders off guard. Emperor Zorgax, watching the mounting casualties and setbacks from his command ship, grew increasingly frustrated. These humans, he snarled to his advisors, they fight like cornered beasts. We must crush their resistance swiftly, before it spreads further. But even as the Craxians redoubled their efforts, the human resistance continued to grow. In the face of unimaginable adversity, humanity had found a new sense of unity and purpose. The old divisions of nation and ideology had faded away, replaced by a shared determination to defend their homeworld at any cost. As the conflict raged on, it became clear that the outcome of the war would not be decided by technology or numbers alone. It would be a test of will, a battle between the unyielding might of the Craxian Empire and the indomitable spirit of humanity. And against all odds, humanity was proving to be a far more formidable foe than the Craxians had ever imagined. Turning the tide. As the war entered its second year, the balance of power began to shift. The human resistance, once scattered and disorganized, had coalesced into a formidable fighting force, armed with captured Craxian technology and driven by an unbreakable will to survive. In cities and towns across the globe, the invaders found themselves besieged by a relentless guerrilla campaign, their supply lines stretched thin and their casualties mounting daily. In the heart of the Craxian-occupied territory, a small group of resistance fighters huddled around a flickering holographic display. They were the Ghosts, an elite unit that had become the stuff of legend among both humans and Craxians alike. Led by the indomitable Captain Jack Reese, they specialized in daring raids and sabotage missions deep behind enemy lines. "All right, listen up," Jack said, his grizzled face illuminated by the hologram's blue glow. "We've got a golden opportunity here. The Craxians are moving a massive shipment of weapons and supplies through this canyon. If we can take it out, we'll deal a serious blow to their offensive capabilities." The other Ghosts nodded, their eyes gleaming with determination. They knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake. If they could disrupt the Craxian supply chain, it could buy the Resistance precious time to regroup and strike back. As the Ghosts set out on their mission, other Resistance cells across the planet were launching their own operations. In the skies above Earth, human pilots flew captured Craxian fighters, engaging the enemy in vicious dogfights. On the ground, retrofitted tanks and artillery units bombarded Craxian positions, their advanced alien alloys now turned against their former masters. The Craxians, for their part, were beginning to feel the strain of the prolonged conflict. Their initial blitzkrieg had failed to crush the human resistance, and now they found themselves mired in a grinding war of attrition. As their casualties mounted and their resources dwindled, even the most hardened Craxian warriors began to question the wisdom of the invasion. Emperor Zorgax, watching the tide of battle turn against him, grew increasingly desperate. He ordered his forces to redouble their efforts, unleashing devastating orbital bombardments and chemical weapons against human population centers. But even these brutal tactics only served to galvanize the resistance, driving more and more humans to take up arms against the invaders. Back in the canyon, Captain Jack Reese and his ghosts lay in wait, their weapons trained on the narrow pass below. They had spent days preparing for this moment, rigging the canyon walls with explosives and setting up kill zones to maximize their firepower. As the Craxian convoy approached, Jack felt a surge of adrenaline. He knew that the fate of the resistance might well depend on the outcome of this one battle. With a deep breath, he gave the signal to attack. The canyon erupted in a maelstrom of fire and shrapnel as the explosives detonated, sending Craxian vehicles and soldiers flying. The ghosts opened up with everything they had, their stolen plasma rifles and grenade launchers tearing through the enemy, ranks like a scythe through wheat. For a moment, it seemed as though the Craxians might break through the ambush. Their return fire was furious, and several ghosts fell under the onslaught. But Jack and his team held their ground, pouring fire into the enemy until the last Craxian lay dead or dying in the dust. As the smoke cleared, Jack surveyed the battlefield with a grim sense of satisfaction. The Craxian convoy lay in ruins, its precious cargo now in the hands of the resistance. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it was a victory nonetheless. Across the planet, similar scenes played out as the human resistance gained ground. The Craxians, once thought invincible, now found themselves on the defensive, their hold on Earth slipping with each passing day. The tide of the war had turned, and humanity, against all odds, was beginning to believe that victory might just be possible. But even as the resistance celebrated its successes, they knew that the hardest battles were still to come. The Craxians were far from defeated, and they would not give up their prize easily. The road to freedom would be long and bloody, paved with the sacrifices of countless brave men and women. But for now, in the aftermath of the canyon ambush, Captain Jack Reese and his ghosts allowed themselves a moment of triumph. They had struck a blow against the invaders, and in doing so, they had kindled a flame of hope in the hearts of their fellow humans. It was a flame that would not be easily extinguished, no matter how dark the days ahead might be. Taking the fight to the Craxians. As the war entered its third year, the human resistance had grown into a formidable force, armed with captured Craxian technology and emboldened by a string of hard-fought victories. But even as they pushed the invaders back on Earth, the resistance leaders knew that they could not win the war alone. To truly defeat the Craxian Empire, they would need to take the fight to the enemy's own doorstep. In a secret underground bunker, the resistance leadership gathered to plan their next move. Among them was Admiral Elena Ivanova, a former Russian naval officer who had become one of the most respected military minds in the resistance. "We've done well so far," Elena said, her voice firm and commanding. "But we all know that as long as the Craxians control the high ground, we'll never be truly safe. We need to hit them where they live." The other leaders murmured in agreement, but there was an undercurrent of uncertainty in the room. Attacking the Craxians in space was a daunting prospect, even with their newly acquired technology. "We've been working on something," Elena continued, a glint of determination in her eyes. "Our engineers have retrofitted several captured Craxian ships with human weapons and systems. They're not pretty, but they'll get the job done." She brought up a holographic display of the solar system, highlighting several key Craxian positions on Mars and the Moon. "We've identified their main staging areas and supply depots. If we can take them out, we'll cripple their ability to reinforce their troops on Earth." The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal, but the resistance leaders knew that they had no choice. If they didn't, the plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal, but the resistance leaders knew that they had no choice. If they didn't take the fight to the Craxians, the war would drag on for years, with no guarantee of victory. In the weeks that followed, the resistance prepared for their boldest operation yet. The retrofitted Craxian ships were loaded with supplies and munitions, their human crews trained in the intricacies of alien technology. Strike teams were assembled and briefed on their targets, each one hand-picked for their skills and courage. Among these teams was the legendary Ghost Unit, led by Captain Jack Reese. They had been tasked with infiltrating the Craxian command ship in lunar orbit and disabling its communications and weapon systems, a critical component of the overall plan. As the Resistance fleet launched from hidden bases across the planet, the Craxians were caught off guard. They had grown complacent in their orbital supremacy, never imagining that the humans would dare to attack them in space. The first blow came at the Craxian staging ground on Mars, where a squadron of human fighters dropped out of warp and unleashed a barrage of missiles and plasma fire. The Craxian defenses, unprepared for such a sudden assault, crumbled under the onslaught. Simultaneously, Resistance strike teams landed on the Moon, storming the Craxian supply depots and communications hubs. Fierce close-quarters combat erupted in the lunar dust, with humans and Craxians alike falling in droves. In orbit around Earth, the main Resistance fleet engaged the Craxian armada head-on. The retrofitted human ships, though outgunned and outnumbered, fought with a ferocity that stunned the Craxian commanders. Using stolen codes and infiltration software, they managed to disrupt the Craxian battle network, causing chaos and confusion among the enemy ranks. Aboard the Craxian command ship, Captain Jack Reese and his ghosts fought their way through corridors of armored aliens, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. They reached the command deck just as the ship's defenses came back online, alerted to their presence. In a desperate last stand, Jack and his team held off wave after wave of Craxian reinforcements, buying time for their demolition experts to rig the ship's reactor to blow. As the timer ticked down, they made their escape, jetting away from the doomed vessel in stolen escape pods. The command ship exploded in a blinding flash of light, taking with it a sizable portion of the Craxian fleet. Across the solar system, human forces pressed their advantage, striking deep into enemy-held territory and disrupting their chain of command. On Earth, the Resistance watched the unfolding battle with bated breath. They knew that the success or failure of this operation would determine the course of the war and perhaps the fate of humanity itself. As the reports of victories began to pour in, a sense of hope and elation swept through the Resistance. For the first time in years, they allowed themselves to believe that they might not just survive, but actually win. But even as they celebrated, they knew that the fight was far from over. The Craxians were wounded, but not yet defeated. And Emperor Zorgax, enraged by this unprecedented humiliation, would surely seek revenge. The stage was set for a final desperate showdown between the two species. The humans had proven their valor and ingenuity, but the Craxians still had the might of an interstellar empire at their back. In the end, it would come down to a battle of wills, a test of which civilization had the greater resolve. As the Resistance leaders began to plan their next move, Captain Jack Reese and his ghosts limped back to Earth, their mission accomplished but their ranks decimated. They had struck a mighty blow against the invaders, but the cost had been high. Jack knew that many more would pay the ultimate price before the war was over. But as he looked out over the battle-scarred landscape of his homeworld, he felt a fierce pride in what his fellow humans had accomplished. Against all odds, they had taken the fight to the Craxians and shown the galaxy the indomitable spirit of humanity. Whatever the future held, Jack knew that they would face it together, united in their determination to protect their home and their way of life. The road ahead would be long and hard, but for the first time in a long time, the end was in sight. The Empire retreats in defeat. In the wake of the Resistance's daring attack on the Craxian fleet, the tide of the war had turned decisively in humanity's favor. The once unstoppable alien juggernaut was now in full retreat, their forces scattered and demoralized. On Earth, the Resistance pressed their advantage, liberating city after city from Craxian control. The invaders, their supply lines cut, and their reinforcements dwindling, could no longer mount effective counterattacks. Instead, they fell back to fortified positions, hoping to hold out long enough for a miracle that would never come. In the halls of power on Craxus Prime, Emperor Zorgax raged against the unthinkable defeat his empire had suffered. He demanded that his generals throw every last ship and soldier into the fight, determined to crush the human resistance at any cost. But even his most loyal subordinates could see the writing on the wall. The Craxian Empire, stretched thin by the demands of a protracted occupation and faced with a resurgent humanity, was on the brink of collapse. To continue the war would be to invite disaster, not just for the expedition to Earth, but for the Empire itself. In a tense meeting with the Emperor, the Craxian High Council made their case for a negotiated withdrawal. They argued that the humans had proven themselves a formidable adversary, one that could not be subdued by force alone. To continue the conflict would only lead to more Craxian deaths and the potential loss of the Empire's hard-won gains in other parts of the galaxy. Zorgax, his pride wounded and his dreams of conquest shattered, initially refused to even consider the idea of a retreat. But as reports of defeats and desertions continued to pour in, even he was forced to confront the reality of the situation. With a heavy heart, the Emperor authorized his diplomats to open negotiations with the human resistance. In a series of tense meetings, the two sides hammered out the terms of the Craxian withdrawal, with the humans driving a hard bargain. In exchange for the peaceful evacuation of all Craxian forces from Earth and its solar system, the humans demanded a hefty sum of reparations, as well as the handover of a significant portion of Craxian technology and scientific knowledge. The Craxians, their bargaining position weakened by their military defeats, had little choice but to agree. As the last Craxian ships lifted off from Earth's surface, the human resistance celebrated their hard-won victory. In city squares and town halls across the planet, people danced in the streets and wept tears of joy, hardly daring to believe that the long nightmare of occupation was finally over. But even as they savored their triumph, the leaders of the resistance knew that the world had been irrevocably changed by the Craxian invasion. The old nations and borders had been swept away, replaced by a new global order forged in the crucible of war. And with the knowledge and technology they had gained from the Craxians, humanity now had the means to take its place among the stars. No longer would they be confined to their own small corner of the galaxy, ignorant of the wonders and dangers that lay beyond. As the celebrations continued, Admiral Elena Ivanova and her fellow resistance leaders began to lay the groundwork for a new era of human exploration and expansion. They established contact with other spacefaring civilizations, forging alliances and trade agreements that would help humanity to rebuild and prosper. At the same time, they knew that they could not afford to rest on their laurels. The Craxian Empire, though defeated, was still a powerful force in the galaxy, and there would surely be other threats to face in the years to come. To that end, the resistance leaders created a new global defense force, drawing on the best and brightest from every corner of the planet. This Earth Defense Coalition would be humanity's shield against the dangers of the cosmos, a bulwark against any who would threaten their hard-won freedom. As the new order took shape, Captain Jack Reese and his fellow ghosts found themselves at a crossroads. The war that had defined their lives for so long was finally over, and many of them struggled to find a new purpose in a world at peace. Some, like Jack, chose to join the Earth Defense Coalition, putting their skills and experience to use in the service of their planet. Others retired to quiet lives of peace and solitude, content to leave the fighting to a new generation. But no matter where their paths took them, all of the veterans of the Craxian War knew that they had been part of something greater than themselves. They had faced the most terrible odds imaginable and emerged victorious, not just for themselves, but for all of humanity. As the years passed and the scars of war began to fade, the story of the Craxian invasion and the human resistance would pass into legend. Parents would tell their children of the brave heroes who had fought and died to keep them safe, and the sacrifices that had been made to secure their freedom. And though the galaxy remained a vast and dangerous place, humanity would face the future with a newfound sense of unity and purpose. They had proven themselves in the crucible of war, and now they would take their rightful place among the stars, no longer as victims or prey, but as equals. The Craxian War had been a turning point in human history, a moment when the fate of an entire species had hung in the balance. But in the end, it had also been a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity and the lengths they would go to in order to defend their home and their way of life. As the last of the Craxian ships disappeared into the void, and the people of Earth looked to the future with hope and determination, one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same, and humanity would never again be underestimated.